So the more people understand what they're doing and why they're doing it, the how gets easier. So we start off with theory. We start off with philosophy. We start off with intellectual knowledge. But as people begin to share that information, if you can't explain that model to me, then it's not wired in your brain. But if you can explain it now, the process of repeating it and understanding it is firing and wiring new circuits in the brain. Now the person is priming their brain for a future event. If I can set up the conditions in the environment and give people the proper instructions, and they can get their behaviors to match their intentions, their actions equal to their thoughts, if they can get their mind and body working together, they're going to have a new experience. Now, the experience of what they're having, embracing in that moment, enriches the philosophical circuits in the brain. More connections are laid down to what experience does. But the moment those neurons string into place, into networks, the brain makes a chemical. And that chemical is called a feeling or an emotion. And the moment they start to feel whole or unlimited or empowered or invincible or compassionate or have a love for life, now they're teaching their body chemically to understand what their mind is intellectually understood. So we can say that knowledge is for the mind and experience is for the body. And in that moment, they're embodying the truth of that philosophy. And now the research shows that genes don't create disease. It's a fact that it's the environment that signals the gene that begins to change its expression. Well, the end product of an experience is called an emotion. So when a person begins to feel the emotion from the experience, they're literally rewriting their biological program and signaling new genes in new ways. And genes are like Christmas tree lights. They're turning on and off all the time. So the moment the person starts to have a new experience, that's new information. And that new information begins to regulate genes. And genes make proteins. And proteins are responsible for the structure and function of your body. And the expression of proteins is the expression of life. And in that moment, they can literally downregulate a gene for disease and upregulate a gene for health. We've measured it. So then, that's great. Doing it once means that you should be able to do it again. Mm-hmm. So if you're able to reproduce any experience, it's going to become a skill or a habit. So the repetition of an experience begins to neurochemically condition your mind and body to begin to work as one. In other words, when you've done something so many times that your body now knows how to do it as well as your mind, now it's innate in you. It's second nature. It's who you are. It's who you're becoming. And that's my passion, because when a person reaches that level, now they're beginning to master that philosophy. They're embodying it. It's part of their fabric. And it becomes almost a subconscious program. It's just naturally who they become. They know how they do it, but they don't know how, because it's become an automatic process. So when I see emails where people start off with, "You're not going to believe this," in the beginning, it was exciting, but it's happening so many times now that we have a community of people that are applying a very specific formula, and that all of the research that we've done over the last 8 years has helped us to refine that formula. And if you follow the formula and eliminate everything else that's not part of the formula and refine it, it will become a skill. And then you'll have access to begin to make those changes. So for me, we're at a point right now where so many of our students are experiencing the miraculous, not just like changing their thyroid hormones, although that's important, and we've gotten a lot of those. But now we're talking about brain tumors disappearing. We're talking about blind people seeing, not once, not twice, not 3 times. We're talking about deaf people that can't hear, all of a sudden get their hearing back. Tumors shrinking. In 7 days, the person comes with a tumor. At the end of the event, the tumor's gone. I mean, these are the miraculous. 70% of the time, people in their waking lives, they live in a very protective state. They live in a state of stress or in a state of survival. In fact, it's such a program that we don't know that we're doing this. We're always spanning the environment to determine if it's safe or not. And if something appears out of the predictable or unknown, it alerts us. And we move into a state of arousal, and we begin to turn on the very systems that begin to say danger, threat, possible scenario that's not safe. And when that happens, we literally begin to anticipate an outcome. And when we do that, we're always preparing for what could go wrong. And we begin to create the emotions ahead of the experience of what happens if it goes wrong, whether it's fear, anxiety, worry, sadness, pain. We do that unconsciously. That's what a program is. And that becomes the habit. So if you're living in a world where men have to provide and show a certain amount of success and be competitive, then you're not going to open your heart. It's not a time to do that. It's a time to survive and thrive in an environment. And yet, in our work, I see men that if they practice opening their hearts, and it's just being a child again, being a boy again, being curious, being wondering, being free, allowing yourself to let go. And for men, we have to lay down the very thing we used our whole life to get what we want, for something greater to occur. Now, the side effect of that, when men truly do this, I've seen them instantaneously heal from things, from serious heart conditions where they couldn't take more than 40 steps without having an angina reaction, severe chest pain, to stage 4 cancer. The house of cards, when it falls, energy moves into a different place, and the body begins to release 13 or 1400 different chemicals that begin to restore and repair the body. So to the intellectual mind, if a man begins to understand that when they open their heart, they could heal. When they open their heart, they can lead from a different consciousness, that it's actually an advantage, and they understand the science of why in their rational mind, then they go after it. Now they're in hot pursuit of it because it makes sense to them. But there's not a lot of evidence or support in our environment for men to be vulnerable. And yet the latest research shows that vulnerability is one of the 5 top qualities for a great leader. So when men begin to think this through, they start to slowly by slowly, just like a flower blooming, petal by petal, they start trusting a little bit more. They start opening up a little bit more. They start getting happier. They start breaking down the wall, the facade that they've created to have an appearance of being a certain way for the world, and yet feeling so empty inside of them. They start realizing that the joy that they want never came from success, never came from wealth or popularity or whatever men do, but it really comes from within. So we give them numerous opportunities to practice, numerous opportunities to connect. And the heart opens also when you care for another person, when you care for other people, when you give, when you experience gratitude. So a lot of times men, when we do our healings, when we heal other people, you got to be in your heart. And in a very indirect and sneaky way, I know that when I get men in that state and their passion to truly give, that's why they provide with such intensity, is framed in a different way.